Hey, happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls. If you have not seen, because you don't watch, well, actually, they can't really see it. It's still the framing is off. I rearranged the room a little bit, and I put the lion paintings right next to each other so that like people could actually see it's the lion's den. And they still can only see like the very fraction of it in the screen that I can see right now. So I feel bad, but we are live in the lion's den and back at it again. Going at it through the book of Judges with my good friend Stefan. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Today is a good day.
Talk closer to the mic, brah.
No.
Why'd you say it like that?
No, I won't.
No.
I'm comfortable leaning back. Gosh, my posture's so bad. So, anyways, it's up to this point. It's been a very good day. Then Remy called me out. Anyways, Arizona is muggy.
Yeah.
It is so disgusting outside.
It's pretty bad.
My car is black leather seats, like in the car. And so I'm doing that thing where every time I get out of the car, my leg's doing that like sound because it's stuck to the seats. Yeah, it's disgusting.
Do you have AC in your car?
Yeah.
So does that not work? Because my seats don't do that. I have leather seats. Are you saying like when you get in the car initially or when you get out of the car? I think you just have sweaty legs, man. I think that's just a you problem. Say it. You won't.
I got sweaty legs.
No, I wasn't what I was trying to get you to say. I thought you were going to say, get off me.
Oh.
So that's what I was expecting.
I can't because I'm stuck to those seats.
What a clown. We got a good episode for you guys today. We're jumping into Judges chapter 18, talking all about the day nights. Bringing it back to chapter 1, if you guys remember way back yonder when we first started this, which is like a few months ago, which is crazy how fast time's going when you think about it. We're almost done with Judges.
Almost.
What the world? But if you guys remember, Dan was a tribe that sucked. They actually, if you remember, we talked about how in Revelation they weren't listed as one of the 12 tribes to receive an inheritance in the world to come because of this situation. And we kind of see a little bit of backlash from the Danites and stepping out from the hills that they were forced into, and just some decisions they make about finding a new place to shack up at. And we get to continue the story of the Levite and Micah and how that kind of gets incorporated into it. And got a lot of great takeaways. Main things we talk about are like where we put our trust and identity into, because we talk about the city of Laish, but we also talk about Micah and how Micah, he even says in the scriptures, it says like, you take my gods that I made and the priest and go away, and what have I left? So like he feels like he has nothing left in his life, and clearly it's because he's put his entire identity and trust into a bunch of stone cast metal, idols and a Levite. And so we talk a lot about like where are we putting our trust, where are we putting our identity into things. We even talk about like the idea of community, because Laish was a community that was like an unsuspecting, perfect, lacking nothing, utopia type place, which is kind of crazy because you're not going to find that like anywhere in the world today, I feel like. And we just talk about like the consequences of them choosing to keep their walls down and to not be surrounded by people around them that could help fight against the enemies when things come. And so we talk about community and that importance, which is, again, I feel like it's so redundant on this episode or on this podcast. We talk about it a lot. We talked a lot before you jumped on this podcast with me. We've talked about community a ton, but we got to normalize how important it is, because I feel like we've really strayed away from it. But other than that, it's a great episode. You have anything to add, Stefan?
No, I think that's really good. And we just had like lots of little takeaways trickled in throughout that as well. So it was a good conversation.
It's good stuff. It's great stuff. All right. Well, with that being said, let's do this. All right, everybody. We are jumping into chapter 18. We got titled Day Nights, Take the Levite and the Idol. Stefan, break it down for us. What do we got going on in this chapter?
So this is kind of wrapping up from the very beginning of Judges. We talked about this in chapter 1. I think we had it, Don't Be Like Dan. It was like a title of the chapter.
I changed it though because it kind of was a lame name.
What did you change it to?
I don't know. It's right here. It was, oh man. I changed to You Can't Control Temptation.
Ooh, that's actually pretty good. So anyways,
That's why I changed
the chapter was all about Dan and how they were the only tribe that when they went into the promised land with Joshua as the leader, they were the only tribe that didn't conquer the land that was allotted to them as an inheritance.
Right.
And so then they ended up getting pushed off. They're in the caves. They're in this weird different area. But now we see them come out of the mountains. And now it's really interesting. They're looking around and they're seeking for themselves an inheritance. Mm-hmm. They're like, where's our land? Everybody else got stuff. We don't got stuff.
Yeah.
What stuff can we go got? So anyways.
And that was word for word translation from what I remember.
Dude, that's how they talk in the caves. So, so anyways, they go and they're looking, and then they send these 5 spies, and they're looking around, and they get to the house of Micah. And Micah, we read in last chapter 17, he gets this Levite to be their priest. And he's creating an ephod and all these idols and doing all this stuff. And then these people, they recognize this Levite's voice, and they're like going crazy. And then they steal the ephod and all these idols. And then they tell the priest, like, hey, don't you want to be a leader for us? Don't you want to be the priest for a full tribe instead of just this guy? Yeah. So anyways, we have this kind of crazy story unfold, but there's a couple of things that are I want to bring to your attention. So one is just this big loop back to the start of Dan. And Dan is this tribe that goes off into the corner. And what they do is they don't fight their battle, the battle for the inherited land that they should have gotten.
Right.
But they end up fighting this battle for this land. And they rise this army of 600 soldiers, and then they go and they wipe out this city, and then they rename it Dan, right? They rename it, they conquer it, it's all this stuff. And then you're going to hear for the rest of the Bible, there's like this stuff from Laish to Dan, or Dan to Beersheba, and it's now the split of Israel and Judah and all this stuff. So anyways, this is a pretty pivotal moment for the nation of Israel. But I was thinking about this. It's easier for us to fight distant battles than it is the battles that are close, like nearby. Wolf. And I actually have a perfect example in my life is I feel like when my marriage needs some attention and I need to focus on some stuff, I tend to focus more on work problems and start to split off. So anyways, I just kind of wanted to bring that to the attention that normally we are more willing to fight battles that we shouldn't even be fighting. Like we're focusing on the things that we shouldn't be focusing on. So,
and why do you think we do that?
I think that's just almost human nature to not really take care of the things that we really should be. I mean, I think I struggle with this a ton. I'm thinking about actually a lot of different things in my life where I feel like we make excuses all the time to other people, like, man, I'm so busy, got this going on, I've got this going on. But really, we should be focusing on that one relationship and really making it healthy. Or we should be focusing on our business or some different adventure. We've got a crazy schedule, but we're adding all these other tasks to avoid that main one because we know it's going to take a lot of effort. So it's like, man, I should focus all my attention over here so I don't have to focus over there.
Yeah, I feel like it's more often than not the sins that we know we need to deal with directly impact our pride and our self-image and maybe the appearance to other people. And like knowing the steps you have to take, especially like for guys, like we know with pornography that it's like, it's not fun to tell other dudes that you like have a problem with it. And so usually like it takes a lot of humility to admit something like that. And so I think a lot of the times we kind of avoid that because we're afraid of like our image or what people will think of us and those kind of things. And so we kind of block or schedule over it and focus on other areas. And we kind of think that because like, I don't know, maybe we think of it like as a scale and it's like, but if I get really solid in all of these areas, then like that kind of counters the sin in that other area where I'm really struggling in. And so it kind of tips the scales both ways, and then you kind of justify that like, well, I haven't really gotten to that part yet, but I'm really good about like speaking words of encouragement to other people. Like I'm really good at like reading my Bible. I'm good at like not gossiping, like those things. But then like I'm really struggling in this area with like envy or with pornography, lust, like those kind of things. And so we kind of, I don't know, do you feel like we kind of make like an imaginary scale in our mind for stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm doing really good on this side of the scale, and this side of the scale is okay because it is outweighed by these things.
Yeah.
And I was actually talking last night. I was with a group of guys, and we were talking about the part where Jesus says, like, I never knew you, to the guy who brings up his tier list of 3 things. I prophesied in your name, I cast out demons in your name, and I did these mighty works. And we've talked about this before, about how God never tells us that we need to prophesy.
Yeah.
He never tells us that we need to cast out demons.
Right.
And there was a point that someone made that I was like, holy cow, that's awesome. And he said, for this guy, so Jesus is talking to him and says, I never knew you. For this guy, for him to get into heaven, it was the list, the check marks.
Yeah.
But Jesus never knew him because the guy didn't believe.
Yeah.
That's all it takes is belief and to trust and know that Jesus is the Messiah. So something that's interesting with this is Dan was promised this specific land. Okay. What are things that God promises us that we don't work for? I think that's the exact point that is trying to be brought up in this chapter is Dan was promised a land, but they didn't work for it.
Yeah.
They worked for this other place and it ends up being terrible. And you're going to see in chapter 19, this horrible story that comes from it.
Yeah.
But what are some promises today that we've been promised in the Old Testament, New Testament, that takes effort, that takes work, that we don't put in the work for?
Yeah. I think the first one off the top of my head would be like God, and you have to be like we have to like tread lightly on this because it's not like as black and white as we think with like do A and B will come to you, because we kind of have twisted the way that we interpret what B is in that sense of like do these things and like you will prosper. Like you read Deuteronomy chapter 28 about the blessings and curses of like obedience. And then we take that and then we take Proverbs and it's like, you do those things and you expect then like good things to come from that. And sometimes they don't. And so, it makes it really hard to like hear stuff like this sometimes of like, but I'm doing those things, but I'm not receiving these things in return. And sometimes it really does have to do with our heart. And other times it's just God's mystery and his plan that we don't fully understand. But I do think that one area is like, for one is like marriage. I think that we want a really good, healthy marriage that people look at and like want people to like be like, wow, like they're a really solid couple. Like they're a really good example. Or even like once you have kids, like you want your kids to be like great, right? You want your kids you want to be proud of them. You want them to work hard. You want them to do well in school, to have like really good relations with people, all that kind of stuff. But like that also requires like investing into them and spending time with them and loving them and sacrificing like your wants and desires and your schedule and your thing to like pour into them. And because those things take time away from other things that we also value and probably prioritize more than them, we don't want to take time away from that to pour into those things to receive that in return. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It takes work to enjoy the promise.
Yeah.
To the fullest. Like God promises freedom.
Yeah.
Not partial freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of us talk about how like, oh, this keeps coming back up and it's a struggle, but it takes work to stay free.
Yeah.
Like that's the same for America. Like
Mm-hmm.
we are a free country, but it takes effort. It takes work.
Yeah.
So anyways, they get to Micah and then they're in this place and they recognize, it says in verse 3, when they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite and they turned aside and said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here? And he said to them, this is how Micah dealt with me. He has hired me and I have become his priest. And they said to him, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are settling out will succeed. And the priest said to them, go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord. And this is a point that I just want to like bring up real quick is we talk about how, Christians do some really bad things. Yeah. And they say that they do it under like the Lord and it's the Lord's vision. And I felt super compelled to do this. That doesn't mean it's right. And you have these Danites who have been off, alone, isolated, asking this Levite, who we talked about last week, is sojourning, who became a priest for this random guy in a house who created his own idols. asking them if the Lord is telling them to go slaughter a bunch of people.
Yeah.
In their eyes, they're doing everything right. The
Right.
priest says they're doing it right, but they're not. And we
Right.
know they're not. And so I think that we need to be very, very good stewards of our church, stewards of the Christian faith when people are doing things wrong, not bashing them and being like, dude, they're anti-Christ, blah, 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 but recognizing, hey, I don't think that's godly.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the God I serve, what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to do a better job as Christians to not play the gossip game, not to slam each other, but to just understand, like, okay, that's not the God that I worship. I think
Yeah.
they're off. They need prayer. They need guidance. They need some help here. The Danites, what other tribe came up and told the Danites, hey, what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you need to reset. There wasn't any of that. And I think that we need to have a better, healthier culture,
Yeah.
just supporting each other and one another and saying, hey, I think you're a little off here. This isn't biblical.
I feel like that's also really hard to find in our culture because so many people are so confused with what's right and what's wrong, just because, like, kind of what we talked about in the last episode is, like, we've kind of, like, lost sight of the sacredness of scripture in the text and, like, what God commands us and calls us to do. And so we kind of live in this weird, like, well, I'm hearing messages nowadays that say that, like, these things are actually, we've been learning it wrong for thousands of years. And, like, finally, like, we understand the truth of scripture and, like, this is the truth. And we, like, love all people and we accept this and we do that now. And, like, this is okay to do. And so I feel like a lot of people without proper training have no idea to know whether or not, like, what they're doing is, like, against the Lord. And it's like, no, that's not the God that we serve of the Bible, because a lot of people now, they don't care really about the God of the Bible. They really care about, like, the God of love, or, like, the God that kind of fits into their description of what they believe is, like, a good God, you know, like, very limited in our understanding, but we still think that, like, that's the best way, like, God could exist, is, like, a God that's free of judgment, like, God that doesn't, like, bring justice and do these things. Like, why would God send anybody to hell and those things? And so then, because we've twisted into a different version of God, then when we see stuff like that happen, we're either in a state of confusion because we're like, I can't tell if that's right or wrong, or we just ultimately don't think that it's wrong in the first place.
Yeah. So what you're saying, I love, because I just listened to this leadership podcast. Greg Groeschel, he's been talking about this idea that he came up with, paradoxical leadership. I think I probably butchered that, but it's
Probably.
okay. But he can explain it better. He just came out with a book. But it's a thought that I've been really thinking about a lot, is how Jesus has a bunch of polar opposites. He is fully God and fully man. Mm-hmm. He is the lion and he is the lamb.
Yeah.
And he is love, but he is just.
Right.
And we need to be, and what he talks about is in leadership, you need to have those opposites.
Yeah.
Like, you need to be someone who's extremely optimistic, but realistic.
Yeah.
You need to be someone who delegates, but's in control.
Yeah.
And so I think what we've done with Christianity and with a lot of different ideas about who Jesus is we take one of those far points that are drastic,
right,
and we don't temper it with the opposite.
Yeah.
Like, he is a friend, but he is our father.
Yeah.
like there's opposites. So I think that's the one thing that we need to really be careful of when we're reading the scriptures and when we're listening to people and when they have their ideas. Is it is it balanced?
Yeah.
Is there two sides to what they're talking about, or is it just love?
Yeah.
Is it just grace?
Yeah.
Is it just this? And yes, there's those points,
right,
but it needs to be balanced.
Yeah. 100% agree with that.
So moving on. So he says, go in peace. And what he does is they end up going on this journey. The 5 men depart it, and then they go to this land of the Sidonians. And it says, this verse is kind of crazy because I feel like there's nowhere in the world that has this right now. It says it was quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing that is in the earth, and possessing wealth. And they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealing with anybody. So it's like this little utopian society that has wealth, and they didn't have a king. They had, they didn't really have security because they didn't have this, but they felt like they didn't need it,
right,
because they were off on their own and felt like there was no harm going to come their way.
Well, I wonder if they've never experienced harm either. Like, they just have never had anything like that happen before, so they never even put their guard up because it's never happened before.
Yeah, but it's so interesting because you read this, but I feel like that's so many people's dreams is like, we need this utopian society. Everything needs to be equal. But then you see that these Danites, they raise only 600 men and then wipe it out, destroy it, burn it, pillage it, because there's nothing to protect them, because they have this idea that we have nothing to protect from. It's perfect here. So is it a realistic idea or dream to dream for a society that's wealthy, healthy, and peaceful all the time? Is that realistic?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you brought up just right before this idea of this paradoxical like balancing scale, right? Where you kind of get like the opposites of each other. And so on the one side, we have a utopia that's like, you know, amazing. Everyone has what they need. Everyone's provided for. There's complete equity. I mean, there is no pain, sickness, like any of those kind of things, right? Like that's what we like imagine and dream of. But then on like the complete opposite side, it's just complete destruction and chaos and mayhem. And we kind of like dream of that. And that's not to say that we want to balance it with that sinful side of us, or want to balance it with like the sinful side of the world and those evil things. Like obviously, like we as Christians technically dream of a dystopia or a utopia, but in the life to come, in the next world, right? So like we do have that dream, but we're trying to like kind of bring that heaven on earth, which I think there's a lot of great elements to it that are fruitful and great for us to desire. And like, absolutely, we should do the most that we can. But I think we just forget when we're dreaming these things that it's not that, it's like we forget that there is still sin in the world. There is still a flesh to every single human body. There is still an enemy that is prowling like a lion, looking for someone to devour, that there is spiritual warfare all around us. And because we forget that, we dream of this utopia, this perfect world. But at the exact same time, like we're neglecting the fact that no matter how perfect you try and get, no matter how much money you make, how much security you have, like all of these different things, like at the end of the day, like everything can still be taken away from us at any given moment, because we still battle these things in the world because of what we understand from scripture. Like we still have the world, we have the devil, and we have the flesh. And because those three things still exist before Jesus has returned, that is always going to be a struggle we have. So I think that the best way to answer that is like, yes, it's like, it's not bad to initially like to want those things, right? Like it's not bad to want to like have a good job and make money and want to like pay for your family and like to have a house that's like nice and like fits everyone. Like I think that if you dream of like $1 billion mansion and like being the richest person in the world, might be a little bit of a problem there. But I think for most of us, like those aren't inherently bad things to desire, but I think that we prioritize that more than anything. And if anything, it's ironically, it's like we're settling for less when we do that, right? Like there's so much more to the world than just having a nice house, right? Just having a nice car. Like once I get to that point, then I have made it. And it's Jim Carrey that had this really famous quote. He said, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe a couple of years. The dude's retired now, but he basically said that he was like, I wish that everybody could be rich and have everything that they would want like me, and learn that it's not enough. Like it's not the end goal, that it's like, it's a facade. It's a lie. And like, I wish more people spoke out about that, about like how it's like empty, like you think you're being filled by it, but ultimately in the end, like it still leaves you wanting more. And like we as a society, like think that that's where to settle. But like Jesus shows us that there is so much more to life, to experience the fullness of life, than having a really sweet ride and having like a cool 2-story house with a pool in the backyard and a great view. Those are cool things, but like they're gonna pale in comparison in the life to come. So like we sit here on like our own little mini thrones and we're like, look at all this cool stuff I got, right? And then one day like God's gonna come show us something that is immaculately 20 million times better, and we're gonna be like, I just wasted all of my life trying to build this entire empire for my family and dynasty and legacy, and it's nothing compared to what God promises in the life to come.
Yeah, a smaller version of the utopian society is what Micah was trying to build.
Right.
So he builds these gods, he gets a priest, and you mentioned that eventually it's whatever it is can be taken away from us. Mm-hmm. So the Danites, they come in and then they take from Micah his idols and his priests, and then he comes out to them and he's like, you took my gods that I made. And it's so ironic because he's having to defend his gods,
right?
But if they were gods, they would be able to defend themselves,
right?
So anyways, he is trying to get them back, and it's the sad thing where they're taken from him. But he put all of his trust, all of his coins into this one department. And I work with this person, and they were talking about how there's a couple people that volunteer for us in the church. And everything they do is around volunteering. They have, they don't really have anything outside of the church. They don't really have anything that they're building like outside of like their volunteering. So they have no outside communities that they're bringing to church. Like basically everything is based around volunteering, which I think is awesome. Like it's so cool that they want to be in there volunteering, but it almost gets to the point where you need to have that balance too of like an outside life. And so like if you were to lose your job right now, Randy, like that would suck. Yeah. But you would be okay because you have all these other things that you're investing in, and you have like so much fruit and life in it. And same thing, like there's areas in my life where it's like, if that disappeared, it's okay. Like we can rebuild. What are some things that we put so much emphasis on that shouldn't have that weight, that we put too much trust in, that in reality, God could take away, or life in this world could just take away? And it's like, man, you would be crushed, but you're crushed for the wrong reason. It's almost like the Danites where they're fighting the wrong battle. Yeah. What are the things that we're putting the wrong trust in? Right.
Yeah. I think for younger people from ages, I would say 14 to 16 to around like 25, it's going to be relationships. It's not really like, for people that are older, I would say jobs, like your careers would be like a really big one. Maybe social status a little bit. That kind of intermingles between the two. But I think for young people, a lot of it is relationships. You meet someone, you're so young, you're still developing, you're still growing as a human being. You're trying to figure out who you even are. And in the midst of that, you meet someone and they're cool. They're a fun person. Like you really do enjoy having time around them, and you feel like you're your real self around them, which can be great things. But then what happens is you kind of start to mesh into that person, and you feel like so much of your identity in your life is just like in with that person, that if you go through a breakup, it is like your entire world has just crumbled to the ground. And I see that all the time, where it's like people are just struggling with like trying to get over their exes because they put so much, not just like identity, but they gave their identity to them, right? Like we don't have like boundaries today. We talk about like physical boundaries, which is like one area, which is like a very important area for a lot of reasons, but we really skip out on the emotional boundaries and the spiritual boundaries. And so a lot of us will pour everything we have into like someone when we're like 18 years old and tell them like all of our deepest, darkest secrets, our sins, our regrets, like the things that we carry with us from our past, like things that like we ultimately haven't probably healed from, that we're trying to give to God. And we put it on those other people. And then now we like feel like that person is attached to us. And then when a breakup happens, or when like something comes, you like split up, you go to long distance, you go to college, whatever it is, and you end up breaking up, it's like so much of your life you feel like it's just in the ground because you didn't know how to like hang out with friends without them. You didn't know how to go to church without having that person by your side. You didn't know how to literally like do life without that person. And so we become like really dependent on each other in that sense. And I think that that's like the biggest thing for young people. And then for older people, I think careers is like where it is. It's like your status, what's your job title, how much money are you making? Like you want to walk into the office and people know who you are, and they're like, dude, like that guy's a stud, or like, dude, she's killing it right now. Whatever it is, we really put a lot of identity in that job title that we have, or that we want. Like we'll idolize after that title that we're trying to strive after. And then lo and behold, a recession happens. Company has to lay off people. Maybe there's just a lot of internal conflict, whatever it is, and you might lose that job. And then all of a sudden you're a wreck and you have no idea like who you are anymore. And then I guess a third one that just came to mind for me would be sports. Sports is huge. If you're an athlete and you're skilled and you have like potential to do something, you pour hours and hours and hours and hours into that activity, into practice, into training, into like everything you could think of for that. And then all it takes is one injury, and all of a sudden you have a midlife crisis, or young life crisis. I don't know what it is, where identity crisis, where you're like, I don't know what to do with my life because I just spent the last 15 years doing sports and activities. And now doc says I can never play on the field again.
It's interesting you bring these things up, because I feel like in every single one of those areas, when I stopped trying to be the best, and when I stopped trying to be looked at and be the next person, is when I actually started to flourish. So like in job, like if you're trying to be seen so that you can have the next title, everyone knows what you're doing.
Yep.
But if you put your head to the ground and you enjoy life and you just are working hard because you love it and it matters, you're going to kill it and everyone notice, and you could care less because that's not what it's about. It's because you enjoy it and it matters. So I think of like teachers, like, some teachers you even knew when as a kid, like you're like, man, this teacher's like going way above and beyond, and it doesn't matter. But then you have that one teacher that's there, and you can tell they just love being there. Yeah. They just want to pour into the students. They care for them. My favorite teacher, he was a social studies teacher, and I learned a lot in his class, but I can't tell you a single thing I learned from him, but I just remember how intentional he was and how like I knew what to expect from him every single day in class and his intentionality. And he could have been promoted. I know he could have gone off and done other things, but he's still the same teacher at the high school I went to, and he's amazing. And
that reminds me of just of a quote that I've heard where it's, you will almost always forget what someone says to you, but you will never forget how they make you feel.
Yep. No, I totally agree. So I was thinking about, man, if we were to stop putting trust in those kinds of things, relationships, I think you need to trust your spouse. I think that is a big deal. Right. But like different things like that, or like trust in you progressing in a business, or your social media page elevating so that you're popular, all those different things. It's like, man, if you were to stop focusing on those things and just enjoy life and what God's giving you, you're going to flourish and be exactly where you're supposed to be. But one of the things that you said for young kids about relationships and only having one relationship and being isolated. Yeah. This speaks perfectly to this chapter, and we'll just end on this note. So it says that Dan, they looked at Laish, and in verse 20 it says, to the people, quiet and unsuspecting, and struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon. And it's so true that when you are isolated, it's so much easier when there's a breakup or when something happens for your whole world to feel like it's on fire and to crumble. You need to be paired to other people. You need to have a good community. You need a support system. Like in my marriage, Chasey would agree with this. We had for a couple years where we didn't really have anybody that we really hung out with. We did our things. We went to church. We volunteered. We had our jobs, but we didn't have a neighborhood group that we were plugged into with other married couples. And now we're in this married couples group, and there's 3 other couples in it, and it's a game changer. Like they become our best friends. We hang out. We see them every single week. We see other couples during the week when we're out group time. It's like, hey, you want to hang out Thursday, or you want to hang out over the weekend, or whatever it is. Yeah. And I'm not married to anybody else. I'm married to Chasey, but like having other cities, quote unquote, like Sidon nearby, it just helps. It helps so much. And so I'm just encourage you, if you're dating somebody and you feel like you're being stripped of all your friends, or you're married and you guys are so isolated on your own, you need to find couples that uplift you and encourage you, and you can speak to you about what's going on in your life. It doesn't even have to be about marriage, just life in general. Like it's so good to talk to other people. You need that. Yeah. Yeah. To tack on to that, outside of relationships, just even for like people that are single, just how important it is to have that community, because more than anything, like, yes, they're great for like having fun times, being entertained, doing fun things, all that kind of stuff. Right. But then like on the other side, when life starts to like hit the fan, like what kind of like support group do you have around you? What kind of people are there by your side? Like I just got a message from a friend who texted in a group chat saying that one of their friends had miscarried, and they were taking them to the hospital, and just such a horrible situation. But one of the things he mentioned in the text is that like there was so many people surrounding her already with so much love, and like just being there to support her, and like they were all like with her together and stuff. And it's like that's an extreme of and such a hard topic of like something like a miscarriage. But
like imagine like being in that situation and not having anybody around you to like go with you to the hospital or to take you somewhere. Like that just breaks my heart. And like, it's not always going to be extreme. Like there's just going to be seasons in life where sometimes we go through like really hard times. We are struggling. It could be depression. It could be anxiety. It could be whatever it is that life is just like hitting us so hard with. And it's like, who is around you to help like just be by your side and support you, right? Who's there to like be a shoulder to lean on and just be a presence to kind of like help walk you through it. Not someone that's going to come in and like cure your problems for you. Like we don't want that when we go through hard times. Like we, more often than not, we know like the outcome. Like if you lose a loved one, you know that it's a process and that over time, like it gets, you know, a little bit easier for every day, but like it never takes away the pain or whatever. But like, we're not asking for someone to just come in and like be like, can you just say the right words to me so that this pain goes away? Like that, there's nothing really that does that. Like people just want someone to be around with. And like having community has so many like different benefits to it other than just like being a fun group, like giving you some things to like some memories to think about and stuff. It's like more than not, like when something happens that comes out of nowhere, like this, it literally says, quote, an unsuspecting city. Like all of us, especially in America, have everything so good in so many ways. And we think that like life, like we're untouchable. We think that nothing could happen to us and that, you know, we are invincible to some degree, right? And so when something catastrophic happens or something in our life happens that hits us like a curveball and we just didn't see it coming, like who's there to be there with you and to help you go through that? And it's not to say that like you get burned to the ground and completely removed from society like you do in the case of Laesh, but in the sense where it just makes everything so much harder to go through and it can bring so much more pain and it can prolong some of the suffering that happens in our lives. And having the right people around you to support you and to be there to like show you love, it's so necessary. So that's what I would just add to that.
Yeah, man, what a great chapter. There was so much good conversation around that, and just want to encourage you, be fighting the right battles, have the right people around you, focus on what God has put in front of you and stop putting your trust in other things. It's so important to make sure that you're going through every single day focusing on what God has in store for you and not other things. So I just want to encourage you guys, kill it this week and reach out to the right people.
Heck yeah, guys. Sweet. Well, with that being said, we hope you guys did love this episode. If you did, share it with other people, leave us a review. It's free and it's super helpful for us in trying to reach other people. And then outside of that, you can always check out our shop at askuswhyshop.com to support us. And if you already do those things or if you don't, and either way, if you don't go to our shop and buy something or even leave us a review, we still love you. You're so cool. But make sure you're following us on social media. See what we got going on. Keeping the updates for everything that we're doing. We're dropping lots of cool stuff and have a lot of exciting things for the future. So we'd love for you guys to stick around for it and be a part of the community for it. Other than that, we love you guys and we hope you have a phenomenal Tuesday. With that, peace out.